keep up. Please don't crash. That's 5-0 on your ass. Don't get stuck. My shit blast.
Yeah. What's the deal, everybody, man? This is Ricky Montoya checking in, aka the foolest of all bears, and you are now tuned in to I Think You're My Driver podcast, man. So thank you so much to everybody who has been tuning in thus far. If you are not already following me, that is going to be at itymd.podcast. Of course, that's going to be on Instagram. That's on TikTok. That's on YouTube. That's on Spotify. That's on Apple Music and everywhere else that you can enjoy podcasts at, man. So thank you so much to everybody who has been tuning in with me. If you haven't already, go ahead and join the family, man, because today we are on episode 28. And episode 28's title is going to be first name Yousa, last name Hater. So let's go ahead and just get right into it, man. So over the weekend, I was watching this great video. Shout out to Jay Anderson, man. He runs this YouTube channel that basically talks about the dark psychology of a lot of characters in TV shows and movies. One video in particular caught my attention, and it is called The Dark Psychology of Walter White. So for those of you guys who don't know who Walter White is actually a character in the TV show called Breaking Bad. Now, to give you guys just a little bit of context of who Walter White is in the show, Walter White is basically the main character of Breaking Bad. Walter's background is he is actually a science teacher who actually used to work for this company that was, I believe, also science involved as well with his best friend. He dropped out of the business and decided to switch his career path to something more practical, and decided to become a teacher. Everything is guaranteed. The benefits are there and everything like that. He sold this share of the company, went to become a teacher. 12 years later, this company is worth millions, almost billions. So somewhere deep down, it definitely created some kind of resentment, which started to show itself within the show. So with having this kind of resentment in your life, knowing that you watched your best friend, who you are still cool with to this day, get all the success that you would love to have. On top of that, you are a married man with a son who, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, he had Bell's palsy. So he was a little bit disabled, had trouble getting around, being a middle-aged man. And then on top of that, your wife is 7 months pregnant and you just found out that you have cancer. Cancer is on top of that already stage 3. So you got a lot of stuff on your back, a lot of stuff in your backpack that you're having to consider, and you just got the worst news that something is in your body that is terminal. And there's no turning around at this point. So what happens to Walter is Walter has a midlife crisis where he realizes he's going to have to give his family something to support themselves, being that he is the main person that is supporting this family. So with somebody that is having this need of needing to get the support as quick as possible, and support, we're talking about money, the first thing that Walter White ends up landing upon is running into an old classmate that he actually used to teach. Him knowing a little bit of his background, long story short, they get together and end up start cooking meth. Now, being that Walter has his background in science, so to say, actually chemistry to be specific, Walter actually decides that he's going to cook the purest form of this said drug. So Walter White decides to take on this new character, which he calls Heisenberg. Now, Heisenberg is this persona that he's created for the amount of product that he's been able to cook up at the purest form. Him still trying to be a teacher and live his regular life, he creates this double-sided persona. Now, what's interesting about this video in particular is it broke down as far as like the psychology facts, and it labeled him as what they call anti-personality disorder. And what anti-personality disorder, according to that video, was basically somebody who's able to toggle between two different lives. Somebody who creates a character to break themselves out of this shell that they've created in their regular life. Now, when you create this second life, this persona, you start to fuel into this persona so heavy that at some point the lines get blurred between the persona and the real person, aka Walter White. So as you can imagine, this created turmoil in his life. Like I said, he's a married man. He has a 14-year-old son and a baby on the way. So it's a lot of emotions going on through this house, and he's having to bottle up this persona of all this money that he's making to leave for his family. And he can't even advise his family on what he's doing because on top of that, to throw another fork in the road here, His wife's brother-in-law, his also brother-in-law, is a part of the DEA. So we got all of these like negatives going against him, and it's starting to line up as to why are you even making this decision, being of all the stuff that you have right there on the front lines that you have to protect as a man. But as a man, him having this persona of being perceived as a loser, oh, I just work a teacher, I'm a married man, it's this and that. It's what it comes down to is men's ego. And, speaking as a man, it can definitely be very tough to understand and walk along the righteous line when you are a man dealing with, let's say, baggage, or you're dealing with a lot of uncomfortable situations to where it's having to break you out and show the real character of who you actually are. So, in this video, he actually kind of broke down what kind of causes the way that his mind can kind of disassociate with a lot of the stuff that he involves himself in. Because of the drug game that he's moved into, it brings in a lot of violence that he's having to take part in just to survive, just to be able to protect himself so that way he can get to his end goal, which is leaving money for his family in case he dies. What's also kind of interesting about this being that he has this, very terminal cancer, it starts to cause a lot of like backup of phlegm for him. So he starts to develop this nasty ass cough throughout the show. But it's like interesting to think that somebody who is dealing with a lot of inflammatory issues due to a terminal cancer is really just sitting around cooking all this crazy drugs, bro. Because I've never done any of that stuff, never been around that kind of stuff. But imagining the amount of fumes that could be really like messing with your head, which I kind of think played into him being able to be a part of this persona, because even though he wasn't indirectly intaking the drugs, being that he was a part of the cooking process, at some point, some of those aromas, some of those scents can kind of start to seep in, I guess like what you would call like a secondhand, high, if that's what you want to call it. So it almost makes me wonder if like whether he tries to lean on that, and being at the amount of lives that had to be taken, the amount of losses, the amount of horrible trips, the amount of kidnappings, and just all types of stuff that led up to all one goal. Now, if you haven't seen the show, at some point he does get to the goal, but the one thing that they will tell you is that the grass is not greener on the other side. And when you're raking in the grass leaves, man, it's kind of tough to just stop. Because, you could fill up about 6 bags of leaves and then it's like, but I still got so much more that I can bring in, knowing that it's coming from nowhere. It's coming from out of nowhere. The amount of stuff that you're having to do just to fill up the rest of those bags, at a certain point, it starts to trigger in between this anti-personality disorder that Jay Anderson was talking about. So it kind of just like brought me back to like the whole beginning of the show, which is him basically selling his share of the company to be in something that's a little bit more practical for somebody who's a married man with a kid, and having to think about benefits and stuff like that, is understanding that there is a difference between things can happen and be happening right now versus the change that can really come whenever you kind of stay down. Granted, speaking from experience, it's kind of tough to really stay down when you got a lot of stuff that's pushing your back against the wall. But at the end of the day, whenever you are on those ropes, you got to find a way to bounce back. You got to find a way to bob and weave and get out of that corner, But it also comes down to the kind of character that you have, which is what kind of points out the flaws in Walter White's character in the show, because it shows that what it came down to at the end of the day was him just kind of fueling his ego. And the fuel to his ego was actually the hate and the resentment that he had for his best friend, because he decided to sell his share of the business to go into something more practical. In a lot of cases, a lot of this stuff can work, and it works for some people. But what you also got to learn, which comes back to the character of who you are, is when you decide to make that pivot to go outside of the initial plan that you had, make sure that you keep your head straight and you put on your horse blinders to make sure that you are tunnel vision on everything. Because when you're watching others around you start to succeed, and the moment that you start to, man, As soon as you do that, you fucked up. We're just gonna put it to you like that. And that's exactly what happened with Walter. He really fucked up, bro. Like he allowed his ego to fuel him up so heavy to where he wasn't gonna stop. When he got to his goal, when he was reaching to a lot of these certain points that a regular person from Walter's background, they would have pulled out so quickly, even from the first instance that Walter was being faced with going into this game. A lot of people from the background that Walter comes from would have pulled out immediately. But like I said, this ego that he had that was being fueled by hate just really allowed him to keep pushing towards whatever that threshold was. Like once you reach the threshold, you want more, right? Whenever, I don't know, for those of you guys who ever did Taekwondo growing up, when you break that first board, you either like it or you don't. Once you get your hand and chop through that board, you kind of have an understanding of like, I don't like how I almost just broke my hand, but also at the same time, I didn't break my hand. So how many more boards can I break through? So it's almost like that threshold that kind of fuels your ego to make you be like, how can I get more? How can I be more? Now, what's kind of interesting about this show too, is this show actually ran from, I believe it was 2008 to 2013. Now, nothing really significant about those dates, but kind of just dating back to what I'm like mostly saying about this, him being a hater and just having resentment for a situation that he stepped out of, thinking that it's his family's fault that he stepped out of a position that he put himself in. But really what it came down to is he felt entitled to the success being that he assisted with the come up. But just because you are there from the come up, if you leave at any part of the journey, are you really a part of the remainder of the journey? No, you are a story and a paragraph in the journey. But of course, there's, three different sides to a story. There's his story, her story, and the truth. And the truth about this is that Walter White was a fucking hater. Like, that's really what it comes down to. And it almost made me wonder the more that I kind of started to think and then finish the show. Could you imagine if this show just kept running until like 2015? And why do I say 2015 specifically? Because I believe this was December of 2014, we got the lovely album of 2014 Forest Hills Drive. For most of the people who don't know, there is a great quotable song that would have fitted so perfectly at the ending of Breaking Bad. And that is if you played Love Yours by J. Cole. Could you imagine that if it kind of just fueled back and you had a flashback of your life, Walter White? How you go to realize like, damn, all I needed to do was love mine and stop being a hater, and I could have just died peacefully. But you know what, man? When your back's against the wall, your back's against the wall. So you tend to do some questionable things, man. Now, me kind of telling that story just made you think of when you kind of start to dig back into your past and you associate with people who you used to be around. Now, in this dynamic in particular, the TV show, he grew a bond with somebody that he actually used to teach. It was a student of his, so there's quite a bit of an age difference, which also can kind of point towards that midlife crisis that I feel like he was going to. But also, what's also kind of funny about that is that when you grow up and you start to learn things about yourself and learn things about people who you used to be around, you kind of start to feel this certain, how could you say, like appreciation as to the positions that you've put yourself in life if you've taken the right steps to get yourself in life. And what I'm saying is that when you're starting to make friends as an adult that I'm learning, sometimes the convenience of making friends at your workplace can be a lot easier, being that you guys have a common interest as far as like playing field of where you are. Because prior to adulthood, you're building friendships with people that you have classes with. You're building friendships with, things that you do, extracurricular activities such as, sports, band, or whatever your skill is. You build friendship within the communities that you have. So working is almost kind of like the same concept because you're within a community, even though you may not like a lot of the people that are a part of that. Let's be honest. When we lived in apartments, a lot of us didn't like our next door neighbors. Some of us lived downstairs and we had somebody that liked to play Dance Dance Revolution on our ceiling. There's a lot of things that you run into due to the proximity and the community that you're a part of that you're not always going to like. But sometimes that convenience or close proximity that you are within that community makes it a lot easier for you to build a friendship. Now, of course, which kind of points back to, Walter White, being that just because you come from the same community, you come from the same background, you work the same job, the same position, that person who does the exact same thing that you do may not have the same mind frame that you have. Just because you guys do the same things doesn't mean you guys are going to really bond together well. But of course, this is something that you learn through life as you're adulting. What's kind of just interesting is that you would think that it'd be so much easier because back when we were in school, you sit next to somebody in class and then you're like, hey, man, what's the answer to number 3? Oh, man, I thought it was D2. Thank you so much for giving me that. And next thing you know, you guys are best buds, man. You guys are freaking, standing outside shooting Beyblades and trying to figure out, what are we doing after school? Are we playing Halo or are we playing Call of Duty Black Ops 2? Like you build those simple bonds and it can almost be the same concept when you're working. But also let's take into consideration, what kind of people are you? What kind of person are you? Do you have a family? Do you have this? There's a lot of things that you kind of got to take into account when you're building these bonds. But life is really just all about just like walking down that road and, you're going to hit a pothole. You might come across an armadillo or even a turtle. You decide whether you want to stop or whether you're going to make the U-turn. The biggest thing about this road map of life that we are on is we have all these destinations that we are trying to get to. It's up to you to stop and make a pit stop. It's up to you to stop because you caught a flat tire. And just because you caught a flat tire doesn't mean you can't get back on the road within 2 days, right? So everything kind of just points back to you making sure that you don't allow your circumstances or the moment that you are in your life to hinder you from continuing on this road, bro. Because life is going to always hit you with all these kind of things, man. And I kind of started to think about that when I was thinking about this episode, because there was one particular passenger that I picked up that I thought this was the coolest shit ever. I want to say this is probably when I first moved out to Oklahoma City, maybe about like 2019 through like 2021, somewhere between that time frame. I picked up this lady from like a office call center type of vibe on like the north side of the city. And she was about the same age as I was, if not maybe like a couple years younger. So we're just chopping it up. And, she's telling me how, oh, I'm not originally from here. I kind of just moved here and I found this like awesome opportunity for living. So I was like, what do you mean? I'm thinking, I'm not even knowing what to think. And she basically explains to me that she kind of lives in like this apartment that's kind of a communal space living, almost like, college dorms or stuff like that. But at that time, my wife was watching this show. I forget the name of the show, but it's this show that's a spinoff off of the show called The Fosters. I wish I could think about what the name of the show is, but basically it's a spinoff of that, and it's the two main girls. One girl is named Callie, and the other one is Mariana, and they live in this communal style living apartment. That's like it looks like it's like a movie theater Broadway play, but like the top floor is like these sinks that have mirrors that face on the back of each other, and there's about 6 sinks and showers on the outside, but everybody has their own individual apartments with rooms. And it's almost like they're basically like sharing a big old space, but just renting a room. So it was kind of like that same exact vibe. And like I'm kind of like learning about her, and it was like funny because I'm like thinking like, man, this is things that I'm only thinking that we have in like the bigger cities, San Francisco, New York, and stuff like that. So I'm thinking like, oh, like I'm about to drop her off in downtown. I'm about to drop her off like in the outskirts in like some old abandoned like art civic facility or something like that. No, bro, it literally was in a church in the middle of this like beat up ass neighborhood. It was like an old like remodeled church that got turned into a communal living apartment complex. And it was kind of just one of those things where I was like, I was like, that's really interesting, but such like a cool thing to be doing. Cause I want to say she was probably about like 20, 21, maybe like 19, that fresh out of high school to where you're like just figuring out life. You're just getting out and figuring out who you are. So it's such a like really interesting thing, like watching people navigate through life and get these different type of perspectives. Because the fun thing about whenever I was doing Uber and Lyft is that I was learning all these things about the city. And knowing that we had that type of opportunity, it kind of just gives you another sense of building that community. But, also another thing that also kind of sucks is I mean, I never experienced college dormitory living, but I can only imagine what it's like living in close proximity with somebody that you just met 5 minutes ago, and now you got to spend the next 10 months with this person every single day until it becomes a problem. So there's a lot of people who know how to just kind of just naturally like mesh well with people, and there's some people who just don't like dealing with people. And I think that can also come down to psychology of the background and everything like that. But that's a conversation for a whole nother time, man. It was just like such a cool thing to like think that you can get this dormitory college style living without living on a like big time campus in a big city. It was just like such a cool thing to me because this actually was a topic that I talked about with a previous guest I had on the episode. So shout out to Greg. He had specifically said the cool thing about Oklahoma City, he said Oklahoma City is just very special. And a lot of the stuff that Oklahoma City can offer, you'd be surprised what is offering right here within the city or who you can really run into, man. So it almost just made me wonder, like, what was this person's background that decided to like deconstruct this church and turn it to a communal living? Of course, this is pre-pandemic, or if I'm not mistaken, post-pandemic. So something tells me it was a money grab at the end of the day. But just like having that mind frame of thinking about like the long-term aspect with this small little plan. And I almost kind of had like a certain like, damn, bro, I'm kind of hating because like I wish I could have had that experience as like a young adult, but also on the flip side, as an adult, I'm like, damn, how can I find a building with that same kind of opportunity? Because that'd be like a dope little like experiment to try out as far as like just learning business. Because real estate is probably one of the easiest things that you can get into as far as like low risk. But being a landlord is a completely different thing. Now, when you're being a landlord in a communal living space, that's a lot of responsibility that you are taking in because this is multiple different type of people and personalities under one building, and they're having to find a way to come together that is not fucking up their opportunity of life, bro. So shout out to everybody who finds a way to build these kind of communities or build these friendships within their life. Because it's always just interesting just getting a chance to hear these stories, bro. It's just like the coolest shit ever to me, man. So shout out to y'all. I don't remember the rest of my fucking notes, man. I'm not gonna cap to you. Anyways, man, just moving on from that, man, there's a couple other things that I want to touch on before getting off of this episode. But the one thing that I thought was kind of funny that I think should be like a reopened topic, even though this movie came out in like 2018, 2019. And it was the new Grinch Who Stole Christmas, the reanimated DreamWorks version. Now, I'm not going to hate on this movie entirely because this movie had a fire ass soundtrack. So shout out to Tyler, the creator, for that. But I think the problem with this movie, which was like a huge discussion around the time when it first came out or when it was about to come out, is they completely changed the essence of the Grinch. Now, the whole story and the whole reason that the Grinch is even a thing is because he was literally a absolute hater of Christmas. I hate Christmas. Like when you get that background story when you're sitting down with one of the moms who lived across the street from Cindy Lou in the Jim Carrey version, she details a story about how he comes to school to make this present for, I forget her name. I want to say her name was Wendy or some shit like that. And he spends all day and everybody, after he gets finished making his gift, he's having these flashbacks of everybody in his classroom making fun of him. And one of the kids is like, what's up with your beard? You're a kid. You're not supposed to have a beard. And, whenever you're a kid, a lot of that shit gets to you. Especially, and I mean, obviously, the Grinch was an only child. So he didn't really have any other kind of siblings to kind of toughen him up. When you have people around you that are bagging on you and kind of like, hey, bro, like, get a fucking haircut. They're not giving you those little buffers to kind of remind you like, man, let me get this chip off of my shoulder. Because the Grinch had an obvious chip on the shoulder and little man syndrome for sure. So basically Grinch comes to school. He has his book and he's like covering up his face because he fucked his shit up, shaving and whatnot, trying to impress and get rid of his kid beard that he shouldn't have. And what happens is then everybody starts making fun of him when he has to reveal his face. They're like, look at his face. He's messed up. He's this. And somehow this little kid just went just full, just ape shit and just started throwing all the stuff around the classroom and decides that he's going to pick up the tree, the Christmas tree, and just throw it at all the students in there. And as the lady is telling the story to Cindy Lou, she's kind of just remembering like, oh my goodness. But you could like, only imagine like being, I'm assuming probably like third, fourth grade and seeing that one kid who just, obviously been drinking way too many Capri Suns and goldfish packages that he should be sitting his ass the fuck down. But obviously it didn't happen. And next thing you know, fool was, I hate Christmas. Now, fast forward to 2018, 2019, it's a complete fucking opposite. This guy is trying to save everybody. He has this so-called hate in his heart, but it's also like this form of love, which I think is like a kind of like a great thing to try to introduce as far as like this newer generation. And I think it was a good shift, but also it was like something where how are you going to change up an entire story of a character who's been around since what, the 70s, 80s? You know? That's just like literally the epitome of Christmas when it comes to the Grinch. The Grinch is a fucking hater and we know it, but people still love the Grinch. People still tune into the Grinch every Christmas, man. Like that was like a Christmas movie in our family. So I'm like, why in the world would I want to trade in this Grinch who's literally been a hater for this guy who's like, no, guys, no, Max. Come on, Max, we need to save Christmas. Where's Cindy Lou? Everything is about you. But everything is about him. And it's just like one of those things to where I'm like detailing all these different type of haters who are in front of us. Now, the Grinch is, of course, what do they call it? A mythical creature. He's just made up in literature or whatever, but it's deeply rooted through a holiday because this is connected with a very popular holiday. Now, I say that to say that sometimes it pays off for you to be a hater. But also, when you're trying to make a comeback, sometimes you got to switch up the story a little bit just to keep the interest. But I think that's also the problem that a lot of these remakes run into is that they like to change the storyline that you have written out for this. And sometimes we enjoy this storyline that you provided us, fool. So why in the world would I want to go ahead and just switch up this movie that I grew up with as a child and you just slap this new idea and this like soft ass literature to be like, oh, Max, we need to save Cindy Lou. No, bro, get that shit out of here, man. Sometimes we appreciate haters, man. Cause let's be honest, man. What he say? He said they hate us because they ain't us, man. That was the lamest shit ever. But it's okay, man. Sometimes you gotta have those little lame pick me ups or what they would call nowadays affirmations to remind yourself of who the fuck you are, bro. Because all in all, what this all comes down to in life is that you got to understand who is really there for you and who is only there to cause turmoil and make you understand the character or the kind of person or how you are going to react when you get faced with certain type of characters, man. So don't allow that final boss to like throw you off your pivot because at the end of the day, man, we got to get that money in the bank, man. We need that WWE championship. We need everything whenever I climb to the top of that ladder, bro. Now, I got this last thing that I'm going to say and then I'm going to let everything go. I don't really have the exact story pulled up because it was just the dumbest shit to me, but I just kind of want to get this off just to kind of stick on the hater narrative. So a couple weeks ago now, our fairly beloved Kanye West, I mean, he's probably kind of canceled at this point, but I appreciate graduation, man. I appreciate college dropout, pretty much everything prior to 2016. So we're talking from the life of Pablo and prior, that's where I'm at with Kanye. Everything after that, yeah, we can kind of just push it to the side. But Kanye decides to, go on this rant after apparently Elon Musk tried to silence him on Twitter. Because, Wouldn't be the worst thing if we miss out on that. But the problem is when you're trying to silence Kanye West, he's gonna find a fucking way. That's for sure. He's gonna find a way. And what does he do? He gets back up on Instagram because he doesn't have the Twitter capability to go on his rants, and he posts a picture to say, "I'm the goatiest goat of them all, man." And from that sentence, I didn't need to read anything more. Because what the fuck do you mean you are the goatiest goat of all goats that have ever goated? What? Like, like, bro, he done definitely got a good re-up on that helium. But you know what, man? I'm not gonna give you too much scuff or everything that you have because you already got a lot of people on your jacket. So, you don't need the foolish of all bears to be at your jacket. But I'm on you, motherfucker. So what I'm saying is that like it's just such an interesting thing to like watch all these people who've built legacies and we've grew up with and watch them like just tear down the legacy, tear down the foundation that they build up and really just like remind us why we should stop loving what was in our past. Like Kanye, all his career has been a hater, and he's literally made a career and made it his character of him as Kanye West to be a hater. But it's always so amazing to see haters who have like reached the highest pinnacle, who've done all the accomplishments and have done everything in their life possible to make life successful. But for some reason, they have to bring other people in when they are hating on people not giving them the recognition that they deserve, right? Let me get some water for this. Man, it just amazes me, bro. You would think that with somebody who has reached the heights and the pinnacles that Kanye West has reached, that you would think he would just want to just go ahead and be like, you know what, man, I've been in this game for so many years. Now it's just my turn to just put my stamp down, but kind of just take this opportunity to go the Rockefeller route, start developing people. But, this ties back to the initial thing, you know, part of antisocial personality disorder are the characteristics of a narcissist. And as we've known, and he's confirmed it himself, Kanye West is also a narcissist. So the thing about these kind of people is that, yes, they could reach the pinnacles, they could do everything, they could probably start shitting gold bricks to put into a bank, and they would still not be satisfied because somebody else bought a gold coin that they shit out. Like, you know, not everybody got to be Soldier Boy. Not everybody got, oh, I got to be the first, man. I was the first to do this, man. I was the first person to put on a pink polo and a backpack while everybody was rocking these big ass white tees. Like, listen, just because you stood out and you decided to change the wave, everything happens and the times change. But just because you had an opportunity at some point to make the time change doesn't make anything else that you've done insignificant. But the problem is that when you're in this mindset of this antisocial personality, narcissistic, you feel like when you hit this pinnacle, nah, man, I need more. I need more. So, you get the fucking bull mentality to where you see red and you just tunnel vision, and I'm going to attack everything coming to make sure that they remember I'm the goatiest goat of all goats who have ever goated. Like, shut the fuck up. That shit made me so mad because I was like, bro, go find something else to do. Like, stay over there in Russia or China, wherever you rushed off to, and find a hobby, man. Freaking, I don't even care if you just start breeding sheeps. Like, find something else to do other than just like typing up on the internet to remind us why people don't like you. But you know what, man? Shout out to Kanye, man. I'm not gonna give him all the way shouts out because he's been doing a lot of wild shit. But you know what, man? I'm gonna go ahead and digress off of that one. So I do thank everybody who has always been tuning into me. Now, to kind of conclude this episode, really the main really the main topic of this episode is being a hater. Now, sometimes a lot of us have hater tendencies or hater qualities, but just because it bark like a dog and walk like a dog doesn't mean it's not a bitch. You feel me? So that's something that you also got to take into consideration whenever you are being a hater. Because you can either channel it to its fullest, you can keep it boiled down and, push it down deep inside of you, pause, Or you could just live out your full truth and, just be the hater and just, start talking down on people. Fuck it. Just start a podcast. Start a podcast and just start saying, fuck Donald Trump. All right, man. Well, I think that's enough for today's episode, man. So if you're not already following me, of course, that is at TYMD.podcast, and that is on Instagram, that's on TikTok, that's on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, and everywhere else that you can find podcasts at. So I'm signing off with this one. This is Ricky Montoya, aka the Fullest of All Bears.
Going too fast.
Thank you so much for
150
watching.
on a dash, bitch.
Peace.
Keep up. Please don't crash. That's 5-0 on your ass. Don't get stuck. My shit blasting up. Window tinted, can't get caught. My bitch bad, sport more leave you on your ass.